It's been a while since I published the first part of this series, and fortunately, I have plenty of material. I'm not planning on just re-uploading my shorts and calling it a day. Instead, I'll try to supplement the information from the shorts in this video. Of course, I'll keep re-uploading them, but now I'll provide more context, like explaining exactly where in the anime these stories take place and arranging the videos chronologically so you can catch the references you might have missed. For example, some people were confused about the chronological order of the Crusch videos, and others didn't realize that the Betty and Puck shorts I made were actually intertwined and happening in parallel. But anyway, I'll use this video to make sure you can really digest the info. Before we move on, a shout out and a thank you to the newest channel members. A shout out to Juan Bustamante, a user I had the pleasure of meeting during a sub meetup I held in Lima. Another shout out to Dylan, who's been a member for 4 solid months now. And another shout out to the Megaman fan named Stay Cool. As for my English channel, a shout out to Tonkali for joining. Another thanks to Ver for rejoining. And finally, a thank you to the Luigi fan who joined a few weeks ago. Now then, welcome to another hour of ReZero Trivia to Sleep 2 part number 2. The first section of this video will start with all of Crusch's side stories. I'm not lying when I say I've covered so many of her stories that I literally only have the main EX1 story and one more side story left to finish the compilation of all her side content. But for now, I'll show you what I have. And before we begin, let me remind you that the order in which the video is shown is chronological. Did you know that Felix almost killed Crusch once? Before winning the title of Best Femboy of 2016, Felix had nothing. His world was a room in total darkness. His parents locked him up at birth and treated him worse than an animal. He spent his days lying on the floor, eating off the ground like a starving dog, forgetting what it meant to be human while writhing in his own filth. But suddenly, someone kicked down the door to his room. A blinding light entered along with a small girl with an unbreakable will, Crusch Karsten. She had heard rumors about the Argyle family's eldest son, so she took him out of there, bathed him with her own hands, and revealed the cruel truth. Felix had been imprisoned because he was born with cat ears, a demi-human trait. His father believed Felix was the result of an affair, but Crusch, using her divine protection, investigated and discovered it was all a mistake. The ears were simply a recessive genetic trait from a distant ancestor. Felix had suffered through hell for a simple genetic misunderstanding. Crusch looked him in the eyes and told him what no one had ever told him before, that being alive was not a sin. Cleaned up, Felix was presented to his parents. But seeing those who despised him, his mind snapped. Filled with hate, he grabbed a knife and lunged to kill his mother. Although he was weak, he attacked with blind fury, determined to end it all. The boy felt the blade pierce through flesh and fell to the floor satisfied, thinking his revenge was complete. But when he looked up, his blood froze. He hadn't stabbed his mother. Bleeding heavily on the floor was Crusch. She had stepped in at the last second to take the blow. Horrified, Felix held the body of the only person who had ever treated him with kindness. But Crusch, even on the brink of death, didn't blame him. She told him he had the right to be furious, but that giving in to that darkness would only dirty his soul. When the boy asked her what the right way to live was, she simply told him to live in a way that brings no shame to his own soul. After saying this, her eyelids began to close, her breathing became ragged, and her body suddenly grew heavier. In that moment, he realized that the fear of losing her was greater than his hatred. Felix screamed in despair, begging her not to die. And in that moment of absolute anguish, a miracle happened. A blue light radiated from Felix's body. Without knowing it, he had awakened a latent magical talent, the greatest healing power in the history of the kingdom. His tears and his magic closed Crusch's wound, saving her life. Seeing her open her eyes, Felix understood his purpose. He begged her to let him stay by her side forever, swearing to use the life she saved to serve her. I think it's time to start covering Crusch's stories, so consider leaving a like and a comment to support this section. Remember, I've started a series on cut content on the channel. Felix wasn't always the femboy you love so much. He actually started dressing that way because of a promise he made 6 months after Crusch saved him from his abusive family. Back then, tormented by his own weakness, Felix trained obsessively with a wooden sword until his hands bled. He hated his slender, feminine body. He hated lacking the strength to protect the person who gave him a reason to live. He hated feeling that way. He felt his delicate appearance was an insult to what a knight should be. One day, while he was wallowing in despair after failing his training, Crusch appeared. She took the sword and with overwhelming elegance and strength demonstrated the massive gap between them. But she wasn't there to humiliate him. Seeing Felix depressed over not having the strength to be a knight, she deliberately cut her hand on the thorns of a nearby flower. Seeing her in pain, Felix rushed to heal her. That's when Crusch told him that just as a knight prevents others from getting hurt, a knight can also be someone who helps and heals the wounded. After shifting his perspective, she told him that even if the Sword Saint himself had been there the day she was injured, not even he could have saved her. She survived solely because Felix was there. These words changed Felix's world. As you can guess, this led him to master healing magic and admire his mistress even more. Seeing her servant's genuine smile, Crusch couldn't help but confess something. Her father used to tell her that her face wasn't cute, not because she wasn't beautiful, she is, but because Crusch was always criticized for having a masculine personality with almost no feminine charm. Crusch was trapped. She was expected to lead like a man, yet judged for not being the type of lady society wanted. With a sad smile, she told Felix that she would likely have to abandon her sword training once she became Duchess. She was ready to give up the things she loved and her personal dreams for the sake of duty. Felix couldn't let the person who saved him sacrifice her happiness and true self. So, without overthinking it, but knowing he would never be physically strong like a man due to his childhood, he made an offer. He would become the feminine side everyone expected of Crusch. In exchange, Crusch only had to be the masculine side Felix could never be. That way, both could achieve their goals without sacrificing anything. Crusch let out a laugh and accepted the gift. To seal the pact, she took the white ribbon from her hair and placed it on Felix. He did the same, handing her his own. That is why the white ribbon Felix always wears on his head is, in reality, Crusch's ribbon. And the accessory she wears is actually Felix's. Now, do you understand why Felix suffered so much when Crusch lost her memories and was infected by Capella? Remember, I've started a series on cut content on the channel.
Did you know that the name Ferris was actually born from a silly mistake made by a love-struck prince? Technically, his real name is Felix, but he adopted the name Ferris right around the time he became the femboy you all love. This story takes place just days after Felix decided to start cross-dressing to fulfill his promise to Crusch. The transformation was total. Short hair, a skirt tailored for his tail, and a white ribbon in his hair. Felix felt strangely comfortable, but his adoptive father, Duke Mechart, was on the verge of a breakdown. The reason? The fourth prince, Forier Lugunica, was coming to visit, and his daughter Crusch was missing, out riding dragons instead of getting ready. But then she appeared, arriving on the back of an earth dragon, imposing and beautiful, yet as sharp as a sword. The poor Duke tried to force her into a dress, but Crusch, faithful to her promise to Felix, flat out refused. She told both the prince and her father to their faces that she was done acting like a woman so she could focus on becoming a great noble and a great swordswoman. Forier, absolutely indignant, yelled that that was stupid. He told Crusch's father he would make sure to make a woman out of her and proceeded to challenge her to a sword duel right there and then. He told her to get ready, promising to show her the true difference in strength between a man and a woman. The result was brutal. It wasn't a duel, it was a public execution, and not in the prince's favor. Crusch wiped the floor with Forier, leaving him lying in the garden like a dirty rag. While Felix used his magic to heal the bruised prince, For tried to maintain his dignity by claiming he lost by just a little bit, even though everyone knew the gap in skill was massive. It's even said that Duke Mechart fainted after watching his daughter humiliate the prince in combat. Not that she humiliated him for fun, she just took the duel seriously and gave it her all against a prince who was in love with her and desperately wanted to look cool in front of his crush. While the prince was complaining about his weakness, Crusch told him not to worry about it. After all, the dragon maintains the pact with the nation regardless of his sword skills. That's when the prince said something that shocked everyone. He questioned why the royal family even existed if the divine dragon Volcanica did all the work. Those words, born from a childish tantrum, resonated deeply in Crusch's heart, marking her forever. She didn't know it yet, but those words would eventually shape the famous speech she gave in episode 13. After being healed, Forier decided to praise Felix, telling him his healing skills were the best. But when he thanked him, he called him by the name Ferris. Felix was speechless. He didn't know if he should correct the prince for inventing a name out of nowhere, since he sounded so confident saying it. But then, Crusch smiled. She told Felix that this new name sounded much better and suited his feminine appearance. Then she added that the name was a perfect fit for her woman. That final comment was too much. Prince Forier exploded with jealousy and confusion, and poor Duke Mechart, who had just woken up, fainted again instantly after hearing it. And that is the origin of the name Ferris. Remember, I've started a series on cut content on the channel. One day, the impulsive fourth prince, Forier Lugunica, barged into young Crusch's mansion with a sudden proposal. Send Felix to the royal capital to be trained by the kingdom's best healers. Crusch immediately agreed, recognizing the opportunity for her servant to grow. However, Felix wasn't quite as convinced. He acted reluctant and shy. Crusch, knowing Felix would never leave by his own choice, asked the prince to give her a direct order. So, bound by a royal mandate, Crusch ordered Felix to head to the capital for training. During the entire trip to the capital, the prince treated Felix not as a servant, but as a close friend, something unheard of between royalty and a demi-human. Upon arriving at the castle, Forier proudly presented him to Marcos, the commander of the knights, calling him the future healing promise of the kingdom. But the joy was short-lived. Marcos, spotting the cat ears, whispered an urgent warning to the prince. Bordeaux Zergev, a member of the Council of Wise Men known for his hatred of demi-humans, was coming for an inspection. Marcos suggested hiding Felix. Forier was instantly indignant. He refused the cowardice of hiding a friend because of their bloodline and walked Felix away with his head held high. As they left, the confused commander muttered that he always believed the Argyle heir was a male, not a cute girl. Once inside the castle, several healers discriminated against Felix and refused to teach him, but there was one who didn't care about the femboy's origins. That's how Felix began his training with a rather eccentric court healer, someone who would eventually become vital to both the kingdom and Felix's life. But the peace didn't last long. Bordeaux's thundering voice interrupted them. Felix, scared and wanting to avoid trouble, tried to sneak away, but Forier wouldn't allow it. Instead of hiding him, he grabbed him by the shoulder and dragged him right in front of the intimidating old man. Just as feared, Bordeaux looked at Felix's animal features with disgust and began advising the prince on choosing better company, attacking his lineage in front of everyone. That was when Forier dropped his mask of a cheerful boy. With the authority of a true king, he told the old sage that Felix was his friend, and that was not up for discussion. He sternly warned him that he would not allow anyone, regardless of rank, to humiliate his companion. He finished by asking him who exactly he thought he was to order royalty what to discard. After saying that, he turned to Felix and asked him to introduce himself in a way that would bring pride to himself and Crusch. Faced with the prince's firmness, Bordeaux had no choice but to kneel and show respect. He promised that if Felix proved his worth, he would overlook his race and evaluate him fairly. Once the scare was over, Felix was able to relax and thank the prince for defending him like that. Forier, recovering his usual cheerfulness, downplayed the whole thing. And then, he proudly declared that he did it because, at the end of the day, it is a man's duty to protect women. Felix just laughed, thinking to himself that he still wasn't going to tell Forier the truth about his gender. Honestly, Forier deserved better. Seeing how his influence molded Crusch's righteousness and Felix's loyalty makes his premature death, just before episode 1, a real tragedy for those of us who read the novels. Do you like the Fourth Prince? I've started a series on cut content on the channel. The days Felix spent away training his healing magic weren't easy for Crusch. This worried her father, who, along with the servants, noticed just how off the young heiress was acting. Despite her young age, Crusch had always been a model of nobility, hard-working, hard on herself, and worthy of her family name. But something had changed. The servants noticed she wasn't sleeping well. She was leaving food on her plate, and her mind would wander dangerously during sword training. Meckert, concerned, decided to confront her. Crusch, with her usual maturity, denied acting strangely, but her father cut straight to the chase. He knew the cause of her distress wasn't illness or stress, but the absence of one key person. Felix Argyle, who had been sent to the royal capital to train his healing magic. When Meckert mentioned Felix's name, the stoic Crusch had an almost imperceptible reaction, a twitch of her eyebrow. That tiny gesture was enough to confirm the Duke's suspicions. Although she tried to hide it with logical excuses about her subordinate's well-being, she ended up speaking with so much passion and worry that she overwhelmed her own father. Meckert realized that his daughter missed that cat-eared boy far more than he had imagined. To fix this anomaly in Crusch's behavior, the Duke proposed an immediate trip to the capital to check on Felix, an idea that, although Crusch tried to reject out of pride, she accepted with evident relief. Upon arriving at the castle, they were welcomed by the enthusiastic Prince Forier, who had always had a soft spot for Crusch, so he quickly arranged a meeting with her. The prince, with his usual cheerfulness and lack of tact, suggested going to the training grounds where Felix was working. As they walked, Meckert noticed something surprising about himself. He wasn't just there for his daughter. He also felt a sort of paternal excitement to see the boy again. When they reached the training grounds, Crusch spotted Felix instantly among the crowd of wounded soldiers. There he was, without his usual feminine clothes, wearing the healer's uniform and working with absolute seriousness. Forier, seeing him, wanted to call out to him, but Crusch, in a swift move, covered his mouth. Meckert understood his daughter's gesture, which spoke for both of them. They had seen enough. They didn't want to interrupt Felix's work or distract him. They just needed to know he was okay and that he was doing his best. Forier, although confused, agreed to keep their visit a secret. To close out the day, the prince, who still wanted to spend more time with the green-haired girl, invited Crusch to see some rare flowers in the garden. Meckert, seeing his daughter recover her usual spirits, gave them his blessing to go off together. Left alone and watching Felix from a distance, the Duke let out a laugh to himself. He realized that not only did he have a daughter who acted like a son, but he also had a son who acted like a daughter. Despite that, he loved them both, and he was surprised to realize that how they dressed didn't bother him much anymore. I know Meckert isn't a hugely relevant character, even in the side novels, but I hope the author gives him a somewhat significant role when he appears in the main canon. And now that we're in Arc 10, it seems like that time is coming soon. Remember, I've started a series on cut content on the channel. The story of how Felix became the kingdom's most skilled healer has its dark chapters, and this is one of them. It all started when his mentor, Garich Fabulous, the former holder of the title Blue, took him on a house call in the Noble District. Felix tagged along as his assistant. Upon arriving at the mansion, an elderly servant showed them to a room. But the moment they opened the door, they were hit by the overwhelming stench of alcohol. There, slumped in a corner, was a drunken red-headed man surrounded by empty bottles. The man didn't hesitate to hurl insults the moment he saw them. He mocked Garich, asking if the Great Blue had lost his mind bringing a useless kid as an assistant. Outraged, Felix whispered to his master that this drunk didn't deserve healing, but Garich sadly corrected him. The patient wasn't him, but the woman on the bed. Felix froze as he looked at the bed. There lay a blonde woman, so still she looked like a doll. Upon examination, Felix realized something disturbing. Her vitals were perfect. She wasn't sick, she wasn't injured, she was simply like that. Garich explained that her condition was called Sleeping Beauty. The woman had been sleeping for over 10 years, without aging, without waking up, and without needing food. Felix felt a deep pity for the husband, but when the man noticed that compassion, he exploded in rage. He rejected any comfort. In an act of pure desperation and cruelty, he poured a bottle of booze over Garich's head, cursing him and calling him a charlatan for failing to save his wife after all these years. Garich endured the humiliation in silence, apologized for his incompetence, and walked out with Felix. Felix was furious. He couldn't forgive how that man had treated his mentor. But Garich, wiping the alcohol from his face, revealed the true lesson of the day. He hadn't brought him there to learn about a rare disease, but to learn about powerlessness. He explained that healing magic isn't omnipotent, and that sometimes the hope healers offer can become a poison to those they cannot save. Garich confessed that he saw a potential in Felix far greater than his own, and that one day, Felix would carry the title of Blue. That's why he needed him to understand that knowledge and preparation are the only things that can save a healer's heart when magic fails. But then Felix said something that surprised Garich. He said that, unlike his master, he didn't see powerlessness. He saw potential. If Sleeping Beauty couldn't be cured today, maybe she could be cured tomorrow. And that was hope. Garich smiled, realizing that in trying to teach a lesson about limits, he had ended up learning one about hope. They left the mansion, and Felix promised himself he'd train hard, just to be praised by Crusch. That was enough for him. He had no interest in his master's title. He walked with a light step, believing that even though his formal training was ending soon, he could surely still learn from his mentor. But fate is cruel. That was their last conversation. Barely 10 days later, just as Felix was about to finish his training and return to Crusch, the news broke. Garich had been murdered. And just like that, without warning, Felix became the most important healer in the kingdom. But that's a story you don't know yet. Remember, I've started a series on cut content on the channel. It all started out of nowhere one day. First, it was just a little cough. Then, a general feeling of being unwell. Before he knew it, the prince was already coughing up blood. But because of Crusch's temporary kidnapping and the issues going on with Felix's family, he acted like it wasn't a big deal. Now, we're going to touch on one of the deepest emotional wounds in ReZzero, one the anime barely mentioned, but that completely defined two major characters in the franchise. Forier knew, he felt, that he was dying. His body, once overflowing with vitality, was shutting down due to an unknown illness that affected only the royal family. Despite that, he tried to act strong, at least until he couldn't anymore and was bedridden. At the same time he fell ill, his entire family contracted the disease. This meant House Karsten, Crusch's home, had to pick up the slack for the royal family. The newly ascended Duchess found herself swamped with work overnight. She was burdened with obligations just as the prince fell ill. But that wasn't the worst part. Felix was also tied up due to the deaths of his remaining relatives. When Felix was finally able to see the prince, he realized just how bad shape he was in. Unable to cure him, he lamented his powerlessness as a healer. So, he told the prince that when he died, he would revive him using that spell created by a witch, the one the Argyle family knows. Forier asked him to let him decide when his life ended, and it would be ending soon. Instead, he asked Felix to keep saving the people of the kingdom with his water magic and to never forget to remain Crusch's knight. He added that it had been fun knowing him. On his last day alive, Crusch sneaked into his room, but the dying prince still detected her. He asked her to go with him to the garden where they first met. At that point, the prince was so weak that Crusch had to carry him on her back to get him there. There, Forier asked if she remembered the first time they met. Crusch said yes, that he had fallen from the sky while she was admiring the flowers. The prince barely managed to smile and told her she was wrong. He revealed he had actually seen her long before that moment, and from the second he saw her, his heart started racing, his cheeks flushed, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. The girl was surprised, but the prince told her he was about to surprise her even more. He then proceeded to tell her the plans he had for the future. He planned to make her his queen, and he would have Felix be the knight. Then he added that, because of his personality, he surely caused a lot of trouble for both of them. She told him he was never a problem. The prince then asked if he had managed to become a lion king worthy of her devotion. Crusch remembered how, as a child, the prince told her he would become exactly that kind of figure. It said her breath hitched, and the prince, with the little strength he had left, raised his hand and wiped the path of Crusch's tears. He turned to her one last time to say, "I love you." Or, that's what he was going to say, but he couldn't finish the sentence. In that instant, the cold wind tugged at both of their hair. Seeing that the prince no longer responded, and feeling Forier's body grow heavier against her, Crusch simply whispered that she would have loved to see the future that he dreamed of.
After Forier dies, a few days pass where the Council of Sages discusses what to do with the nation now that the kings are dead, and the way they debated would eventually shape Crusch's way of governing.
The true cruelty of it all was how Furier Lugunica's death was treated as a mere afterthought compared to the passing of King Randahal. The assembly was all that remained, a room cloaked in deep depression now that their worst nightmares had come to life. Crusch, for her part, was drowning in a hollow sense of loss. Forier had been such a vital part of her life that losing him felt like having half of her own body torn away. Even now, if she closed her eyes, she could see his final smile. The image of the prince taking his last breath was seared into her mind. In the end, the feelings he never got to confess had simply vanished into thin air. Miklatov was the first to break the heavy silence. He reminded everyone that they couldn't just sit there mourning forever. The old sage looked at the dejected nobles, trying to rally their spirits. Someone in the crowd spoke up in agreement, claiming it wasn't the time for such sorrow and that his late majesty would hate to see them like this. A chorus of nods followed, and the sentiment spread. Crusch had no choice but to look up and force a smile. Staying there with her head bowed felt like the ultimate betrayal of what Forier would have wanted. She remembered him, his smiling face and the way he always tried to look on the bright side. However, that image in her mind shattered the moment it was declared that the royal bloodline had ended. With the dragon's pact broken, they claimed there could be no greater tragedy for the kingdom of Lugunica. Crusch looked up, doubting her own ears, as a man in front of her clutched his head in desperation. He wailed about how the entire royal family could just vanish and what the dragon would do about it. He feared the loss of the pact would lead to a national catastrophe, especially since relations with the Empire and the Holy Kingdom were at an all-time low. Crusch was confused. What were they even talking about? Another official brought up the issue of the preserved dragon's blood, suggesting that since the dragon might demand it back, they should beat him to the punch and use it first. Crusch just stared blankly as she listened to their deliberations. Everything they said kept circling back to the same question. What would the dragon do now that the royals were extinct? While she knew as well as anyone that the kingdom relied on the creature's blessing, and she couldn't help but wonder if that was really the first thing they should be mourning. She could have understood if they wanted to debate the future of the kingdom or foreign negotiations, but the fact that their priority was how to manipulate the dragon filled her with pure disgust. She realised then that none of these people were actually sad about the end of the royal line. They were just terrified of the consequences, scared that the dragon would abandon them. To them, Furier's death was nothing more than a footnote. The most terrifying part for Crusch was realising that had she not been so close to him, she would likely be harbouring those same fears. She would have had a soul just as shallow as theirs. That way of living repulsed her more than anything, casting a dark shadow over her heart.
Disgusted by what she had just heard, Crusch decided to meet with Felix, and this happened.
Ferris first heard about the royal selection and that Crusch had been chosen. He searched every inch of the castle until he found her in the garden. Seeing her there, standing among the flowers, she looked so fragile that he hesitated to even call out her name. This was the place where she had spent her final moments with Forier. It was the most sacred corner of her heart, a place where not even Ferris felt he belonged. He felt the sting of his own helplessness, like a cold blade pressing into his chest, aching to run to her, hold her, and cast some kind of spell that could finally heal her soul. Without turning around, Crusch sensed him there and congratulated him on finding her. Ferris could only bite his lip, swallowed by his own sense of powerlessness. As the wind caught her long hair, the Ferris brought up the rumours of the dragon tablet and her status as a candidate for the throne. Crusch confirmed it. It seemed the dragon had indeed looked upon her with favour. The news shook Ferris to his core. It felt as if destiny were a series of relentless blows. The death of his parents, the loss of Forier, and now his lady being swept into the royal selection, stripping away any sense of stability he had left. With a trembling voice, feeling like a vessel far too small for such an overflow of emotion, Ferris asked what he could do for her, admitting he was lost. Before he could flee the garden in anguish, Crusch commanded him to look at her. When he raised his eyes, he was met by her amber gaze, a magic that captivated him instantly. Right then and there, she made a vow to him before anyone else, her unwavering intent to become king. Faced with such absolute conviction, Ferris was left breathless. In a soft voice, Crusch began to reminisce about meeting Forier in that very garden and how they used to watch the flowers together. She confessed a secret she'd never told him. Before meeting the prince, she always wore her hair tied up, but she started wearing just a simple ribbon because he had urged her to be true to herself. That choice, which was the origin of the white ribbons Ferris wore in his own hair, was a gift that started with the prince. As she shared these memories, Ferris felt their pasts weave into a shared bond, leaving him caught between a flood of tears and a smile. Crusch assured him that she cherished the time the three of them spent together more than anything. But then, with a fire in her eyes, she added that the dragon's existence undermined that precious time. To the world, Forier only existed to maintain the pact. They didn't truly mourn the man, only the vessel. Seeing her indignation, Ferris tensed. She reaffirmed that Forier Lugunica had truly lived, and that he was etched into both of their hearts. Touching her own chest, and then Ferris's, she sparked a determination, so fierce it could burn away any doubt. She swore she would never let anyone deny the existence of the man who was her Lion King. Crusch reflected on how the Dragon's Pact had protected the people for so long that it had dulled their hearts, making them capable of ignoring the death of a kind young man. She claimed that because the kingdom had become dependent and subservient to the creature, only she could fulfill the dream the prince still kept alive within her. She argued that no other ruler would dare to correct this crooked path, and therefore the task fell to them. Handing him a dagger engraved with the symbol of the Lion King, a Carston family heirloom, Crusch explained that Forier's dream was for the three of them to build the future together. Feeling the weight of the steel, Ferris finally understood her resolve. There, in the place Forier loved most, Crusch vowed to make him her knight. Ferris knelt in silence and offered the dagger. She took it and performed the ritual, tapping his left shoulder, then his right, with the flat of the blade before returning it to him. That day, in a garden where only the flowers bore witness, a knighthood was bestowed, marking both a new beginning and the continuation of a dream. Finally, Crusch urged Ferris to follow her, to reclaim the kingdom from the dragon's hands, and make the prince's wish a reality. Without a second thought, Ferris joined her side. The first of the candidates, bound forever to her servant, walked away with pride, while in the breeze a small bud waited for the perfect moment to bloom.
Days or weeks after this, she would meet Wilhelm Trias and make him her knight.
Ever wondered how Wilhelm and Crusch actually became allies? It all started in the royal castle gardens. Crusch and Felix, who were visiting, witnessed a pathetic scene. A member of the Council of Wise Men, Bordeaux, was being physically attacked by an old man dressed in dirty rags. The old man was screaming at him, demanding to know why the kingdom refused to send troops to hunt the white whale, even though he had brought proof of its appearance. Bordeaux, visibly guilty, could only say the timing was bad. Seeing the violence, Crusch jumped from a balcony, sword in hand, to intervene. The surprising part? As soon as she appeared, the old man surrendered immediately, accepting imprisonment without a fight. Intrigued by the man's intensity, Crusch visited him in the prison tower. There, she discovered this vagrant wasn't just some crazy old guy. He was Wilhelm Trias, and the papers Bordeaux had tossed aside were 14 years of research on the white whale's movements. Crusch confronted him. She asked if he was willing to rot in that cell while his chance for revenge slipped away. With terrifying coldness, Wilhelm made it clear he would do anything to kill that beast. Days later, after his release, Crusch summoned him to her mansion for a private meeting. She knew the kingdom wouldn't give him answers, so she decided to give them to him herself, even if it was a state secret. She confessed that the real reason why Bordeaux and the kingdom were rejecting his plea wasn't out of spite. It was because the royal family had died from a disease. The king's lineage had vanished, and the kingdom was on the brink of political collapse. They couldn't afford to send an army to hunt a legendary beast when the country was in crisis, especially now that relations with neighboring Wallachia were deteriorating. The news destroyed Wilhelm. The man crumbled, realizing his revenge was impossible. With the authority of a king, Crusch scolded the sword demon. She told him it was disappointing to see a legend consumed by self-pity. She asked if his rage and love for his wife were so weak that they would surrender to politics. With eyes full of tears and fury, Wilhelm asked what she wanted from him. Crusch answered that she wanted only one thing: to see him standing tall, being the warrior he was meant to be. That was when Wilhelm begged her to lend him her strength to kill the white whale and avenge his wife. Crusch accepted, but on one condition. She wouldn't do it out of pity, or even for the kingdom. She would do it because she couldn't forgive the existence of a beast that stained the honor of a man like him. She told him she would only accept his sword if he went back to being the Wilhelm van Astrea the world admired. Felix, watching silently, handed a ceremonial sword to his mistress. In a solemn act, Crusch touched Wilhelm's shoulders with the blade, knighting him. She ordered him never to let his soul be sullied again, and clarified that despite being such a great knight, he wouldn't be her number one. That spot was already taken. In that way, Wilhelm ended up swearing loyalty and promising not to bring her shame. The sword demon had been reborn, and eventually, he would get his revenge. But that is a story you already know. Remember, I've started a series on cut content on the channel.
Finally, an Anastasia novel narrates a moment where Reinhard and Julius reminisce about Prince Forier. This takes place shortly after Crusch and Priscilla's candidacies are revealed. That happens to be the side story I still need to cover.
In the back of the tavern was a private room, a space with thick walls designed for absolute soundproofing. The silver shield was highly valued by knights for this very reason. There was no fear of secret conversations leaking out, as both the owner and the clientele belonged to the same privileged circle. After locking the door, Reinhard leaned against the wall and went straight to the point, asking if the reason for this clandestine meeting had to do with the royal selection. The room was austere and functional, featuring only a round table and 2 chairs, a setting stripped of unnecessary decorations to ensure that not a single word of Reinhard's would ever leave those 4 walls. Julius, for his part, fully trusted his red-headed friend's discretion. Lowering his gaze as he braced himself against the table, Julius confirmed that he had, in fact, encountered a 3rd candidate, whom he had recommended to the council that very day after her qualifications were confirmed. Reinhard noted that if that were the case, the 3rd aspirant was also a woman, suggesting that all the dragon maidens might end up being the same sex. When Julius asked if the idea of a woman on the throne bothered him, Reinhard clarified that he had no complaints, as long as the person was worthy. Though he did point out a pragmatic concern: the next monarch would be the founder of a brand new royal line. From a purely biological and dynastic standpoint, he believed that a line of succession was usually easier to consolidate through a male heir. While Reinhard analysed the situation from this different angle, Julius silently brushed his bangs aside, all well aware that the kingdom of Lugunica wasn't just kingless, it was facing the total extinction of its royal family. They agreed that, given the circumstances, the most natural outcome seemed to be Duchess Crusch Karsten ascending to the throne. They discussed how her family had always been close to the crown, even sharing some of that blood, and highlighted Crusch's immense potential and firm determination to rule. However, as they delved deeper into the Duchess's motives, the tone of the conversation grew more melancholic. They mentioned the tragic fate of the royal family, and on a more personal level, lamented the loss of Prince Forier. Reinhard fondly remembered the prince as a fair person who never gave him special treatment for being the sword saint. Though both smiled as they recalled that Forier's true interest had always been centered on Ferris and Crusch herself. Julius admitted that while his contacts with the prince were brief, they were always enriching. Reinhard then caught a note of doubt in Julius's voice, when the latter commented that although it was noble and beautiful for Crusch to inherit Forier's will, something didn't quite sit right with him. Julius closed his eyes, recalling Crusch's recent declaration of war against Anastasia at the castle. While it was true to her honest character, there was something about her obsession with the throne that unsettled him. Julius reflected on how Forier remained like a warm wound in their hearts. You say, but he wondered what would happen if, in Crusch's case, that wound was so deep and burning that it could never heal. born from a desperate desire to never forget, nor let the world forget. Frustrated at being unable to find the exact words, Julius recalled a spontaneous comment he had heard before about whether a story looked right. Finally, Julius raised the ethical doubt that tormented him, whether they should accept a king occupying the throne with a heart chained to the past. He questioned if a knight's honour truly consisted of placing a wounded woman in power, even if she were to be a wise ruler. For him, a knight's duty was to embody the ideal of chivalry and maintain unwavering loyalty, something he felt he couldn't fully achieve under the service of someone in Crusch's current state. He concluded by expressing his wish to dedicate his sword to someone he could trust and follow without the slightest hesitation.
And that's everything regarding Crusch. I still have a couple more novels to get through, but I hope to do so in the future. And when that happens, I'll make a compilation of every single Crusch novel. Until then, just hang in there a bit longer. Now let's move on to the stories of Betty and Puck. A couple of these stories happen in parallel, and I'll put them in chronological order to see if you can spot it. If you don't worry, I'll explain it to you. Beatrice and Subaru's first encounter wasn't actually her first time seeing him. She had seen him hours earlier, a detail told in a novel that very few people know about. The night Subaru arrived wounded and unconscious at the mansion, Betty was busy reading a book when, suddenly, the younger maid started calling out to her. Because of the noise she was making, Betty decided to answer. That's when she found out Roswell had sent the girl to get her, so she agreed to go, but not without complaining to the servant first. At that moment, she thought that while this maid was more skilled than the older sister, it was clear she still lacked mental maturity compared to the other. She then mentions she thinks she remembers the girl's name being Rem. It was normal that she didn't know her, since she almost never spoke to her. But someone's presence would soon change all that. Upon reaching the foyer, Roswell was waiting for her. After a brief passive-aggressive back and forth, the mage admitted to sending Rem, knowing full well that Beatrice would have ignored him if he had gone himself. Then, the main doors swung open. Ram and Amelia had returned from the capital. Beatrice expected to see her dear brother Puck peeking out from the half-elf's silver hair, but instead, she was met with a pathetic scene. The twins were carrying the unconscious, bloody body of a black-haired boy. Amelia, desperate, begged Beatrice to heal him, explaining how this stranger had risked his life for her. Beatrice looked at him with disdain, considering the situation far too suspicious, and coldly suggested letting him die. But faced with Amelia's pleas, Aunt the librarian sighed and agreed to heal him under one non-negotiable condition. The next day, she would have Puck all to herself for the entire day. That was the deal. With a simple touch of her immense magic, Beatrice closed the boy's fatal wound, warned them not to let him overexert himself, and quickly returned to her sanctuary. Back in the Forbidden Library, Beatrice expected the mansion to finally sink into silence. She knew it would take the boy time to recover his energy, but just a little while later, her senses caught movement. The human was already awake and walking around his room. Beatrice frowned, realizing that such a quick adaptation to her magic meant the boy had a strange constitution or an unusually high magical affinity with her. The mere thought made her skin crawl. To blow off some steam from her bad mood, she decided to mess with him. Using shadow magic, she altered an entire hallway of the mansion. She created an infinite loop, plunged the windows into absolute darkness, and rigged the doors with absurd magical traps, creating gravity-free rooms and spaces where reality was inverted. It was a psychological labyrinth that no sane person could escape. She sat on her step, smiling maliciously, waiting to see the boy run in total desperation. Beatrice expected a long and humiliating show, ready to laugh at his suffering, but suddenly, the door to the Forbidden Library swung wide open, and there he was, with a clueless look on his face. The black-haired boy poked his head into Beatrice's absolute sanctuary. For some reason, the door the boy chose automatically connected to the library, and just like that, it would mark the beginning of the end of the Great Spirit's days of silence and solitude. But that's a story you already know. Remember that I've started a series on cut content here on the channel. Have you ever wondered what your pet actually gets up to when you aren't watching? Well, Subaru had that exact same question, but regarding Puck. It all started during lunch at the Roswell mansion when Subaru noticed that Puck wasn't glued to Amelia's side like usual. He asked her what the cat does when he's away from her, and a surprised Amelia admitted she'd never really thought about it. However, she immediately went on the defensive, claiming with the absolute confidence of a child who thinks her dad is a superhero that Puck was surely busy doing vital work to maintain world peace. Seeing Amelia give such a childish excuse reminded Subaru of how, as a kid, he never understood what his own father did for a living. And honestly, even as an adult, he still doesn't quite get it. Though he concludes it must have been important since he provided for the family. So, since they had the afternoon free, he convinces Amelia to go on a stakeout to see what Puck is actually up to. And so, the mission began. Subaru and Amelia started sneaking through the hallways of the mansion as Subaru taught her his special sneaky dash technique. It turned into a hilarious scene where Amelia clumsily tried to copy his silent steps while Subaru got distracted thinking about how good she smelled. Eventually, they found their target and started tailing him closely. First, Puck began frantically scratching the walls. Amelia swore he was testing the mansion's structural durability, but Subaru knew he was just sharpening his claws. Then, Puck sprinted toward the bathroom and dashed out just as fast. Amelia thought he was scouting for breaches in the magical barrier, but Subaru diagnosed it as a classic case of the post-bathroom zoomies that all cats get. After that, Puck raided the kitchen and came out with a fish in his mouth. Subaru figured he'd just begged Rem for a snack, while Amelia insisted he was gathering resources to recharge his mana. Suddenly, the vibe shifted. Puck got dead serious. His gaze sharpened, his fur stood on end, and he started floating in a straight line with extreme caution. Subaru and Amelia held their breath, thinking that maybe the candidate was right, and Puck was finally about to do something worthy of a great spirit. They followed him right up to Subaru's own bedroom door. Subaru gulped, thinking back to the Olgarms incident and the twins' initial distrust. He worried Puck suspected him and was about to interrogate him or go through his things in secret. Determined to clear the air, Subaru braced himself and burst through the door, only to find the great spirit of fire, the literal beast of the end, with half his body stuffed inside a plastic convenience store bag, making a loud, crinkling noise while rolling around and playing on the bed. Subaru absolutely lost it, laughing and shouting that Puck was nothing but a domestic cat with zero wild instincts left. Amelia tried to defend him one last time, stammering that maybe the bag was part of an advanced spell, but she eventually just sighed, hung her head, and admitted she couldn't back him up anymore. This whole ordeal left Amelia so disappointed that she punished Puck from that day forward, making him report his daily activities to her every single day. Puck eventually had to work to earn her trust back with Subaru's help, but that's a story for another time. Don't forget that I've started a series on cut content here on the channel. So far, these stories take place during Arc 2, that is, during the days when Subaru was living in the mansion before Betelgeuse arrived. However, the two videos I'm about to show now happen on the same day, just one from Betty's perspective and the other from Subaru's. If you pay attention to the activities happening during that time, you'll see the connection I'm talking about. It all started on a quiet morning at the Roswell mansion. As Subaru was heading off to clean the bathrooms, Puck appeared, floating in front of him with a deathly serious expression. The Great Spirit confessed to Subaru that he felt Amelia's gaze had been incredibly cold lately. It turns out that after Amelia discovered Puck was acting like nothing more than a lazy, fat house cat in his spare time, her attitude toward him had become quite distant. Puck was in a total panic, feeling like the communication between father and daughter was breaking down. Subaru, with his usual lack of tact, pointed out that the problem was Puck himself, who was losing his edge and turning into a pampered pet. However, Puck blatantly ignored the advice and, after accidentally flooding Subaru with bathtub water during a tantrum, decided to take drastic measures. Puck's first plan was a classic attempt at playing catch. Subaru found him moping on the stairs after the attempt failed miserably. Since Amelia was busy, she had simply tossed the ball back to Subaru and asked him to give it to the cat, completely ignoring Puck in the process. Puck was devastated, explaining to Subaru that his intention was to use the game as an opening to ask Amelia deep questions about her future. Subaru, losing his patience, reminded him that she was already crystal clear about her goal to rule the country and told him to stop being so old-fashioned. Seeing that the understanding father strategy was a bust, Puck decided that if Amelia had grown accustomed to his natural charm, he would have to go back to basics and play dirty, so he locked himself in a guest room to train his cuteness. Later on, Amelia went to find Subaru in the garden to invite him for tea. As they walked, she lowered her voice and asked with a hint of guilt if Puck was bothering him. Amelia confessed that she was ignoring her spirit on purpose because she felt a bit disappointed by his immaturity. Subaru agreed with her immediately, assuring her that a bit of discipline would do Puck some good to knock him down a peg. Amelia nodded, fully determined to stand her ground and not give in to his whims, all to teach him a lesson. But then, they reached her room and opened the door. In the center of the room, Puck was executing the cutest, most calculated and manipulative choreography Subaru had ever seen. The cat was twitching his tail, making his eyes shimmer with fake tears, and letting out a purr so mournful it was a direct assault on the human protective instinct. It was the ultimate trap perfected by a house cat, and it was so effective that it said Amelia's resolve crumbled into dust in a single second. Blushing furiously, she ran to hug him, desperately apologizing for being so stubborn while rubbing her cheeks against him. From the safety of Amelia's arms, Puck shot Subaru a victorious look, letting him know his master plan had been a resounding success. Subaru just stood there, staring at the scene dumbfounded as he realized a great universal truth. The reason a cat becomes so arrogant is simply due to the owner's lack of discipline. He sighed and went off to drink the tea he was supposed to have with Amelia all by himself, in knowing those two wouldn't stop pampering each other until lunchtime. The funny thing is, in the sequel to this story, Puck gets his revenge on Subaru with Roswell's help, setting a trap where our protagonist ends up making a total fool of himself. But that's a story you might already know. Remember, I've started a series on cut content here on the channel.
For Beatrice, the Forbidden Library was a sacred sanctuary of absolute silence. Or, at least it was, until Natsuki Subaru showed up, somehow always managing to find the entrance. One afternoon, the guy had the nerve to walk in just to tell her that girls like her shouldn't be locked away, but out playing in the sun. Indignant at being treated like a child, Betty demanded he get to the point. But upon learning that was his only reason, she sent him packing with a shockwave. With silence restored, she tried to get back to her book, only to realize that, thanks to him, she'd forgotten what page she was on. Honestly, nothing was going her way lately. What's worse is that since Subaru arrived, everyone in the mansion has started taking too many liberties with her. First, Ram dumped a bunch of vegetable baskets at the entrance, asking her to link the door to the kitchen so she wouldn't have to carry them. Even though she complained about not being their servant, Beatrice reluctantly gave in. Then, taking advantage of the shortcut, Rem approached with a maternal tone to ask how many bell peppers she could handle for dinner. Tired of arguing, Betty agreed to a maximum of 3. However, with an unforgiving smile, Rem told her she'd put in 4 to help her grow. And as Beatrice slammed the door shut, she heard the twin tell Rem she'd better make it 5. Days later, her patience finally snapped. Subaru cracked the door open, drenched from head to toe and half naked, dripping water all over the floor. He explained that Puck had pulled a prank on him and begged her to link the library to his room so he wouldn't soak the hallways. Beatrice was seething with rage. After all, the shameless guy had already used her sanctuary as a shortcut to the bathroom before. But to keep him from making even more of a mess, she had no choice but to give in. She linked the door to his room and, as a way to get back at him, blasted him with another shockwave that sent him rolling all the way to his bed. But that wasn't enough for her. While walking through the halls looking for her victim, Beatrice overheard voices. It was Subaru and Puck talking. To avoid being caught eavesdropping, she quickly hid in a guest room closet. And then, a miracle happened. She saw Puck, influenced by some weird plan of Subaru's, start rolling around on the floor, meowing sweetly and acting like the most adorable kitten in the world. Beatrice, hidden in the shadows, was absolutely mesmerized by her big brother's cuteness. That same afternoon, Subaru returned to the library, this time carrying cleaning supplies and apologizing for soaking the entrance. He expected Beatrice to scream at him or hit him, but instead, she looked at him with a small smile and, for the first time, actually thanked him. She told him that once in a while, he did things right and that he had shown her something very sweet. Subaru stood there dumbfounded, completely terrified, thinking Beatrice had a fever or was hallucinating from lack of sunlight, and screamed that he was calling a doctor. Beatrice, losing the tiny bit of patience she had left, sent him flying for the 3rd time. Once alone, Beatrice sat on her steps and thought that maybe, just maybe, putting up with a little noise every now and then wasn't so bad if it brought moments like that. Though she quickly told herself that would be spoiling him way too much, the small smile on her face proved that, deep down, the presence of that noisy kid didn't really bother her all that much anymore.
The stories I'm putting in now take place during the beginning of Arc 3 and show us how, while one side was planning how to ruin Subaru, the other side realized they missed him.
The anime hid the most crucial context behind the scene where Subaru makes a fool of himself. And it makes sense that they hid it, because it was only in the novel, specifically in a side story called The Great Spirit Puck's Tricks. It reveals that Roswell and Puck actually knew someone was going to cause a scene, but instead of stopping it, they agreed to use that humiliation to their advantage. While Subaru was meeting Priscilla and Al in episode 13, the story reveals how Amelia arrived at the palace. To kill time, they started chatting about the royal selection. Roswell pointed out that the dragon seemed to prefer women, since all the candidates were girls. He then implied it was practical. It ensures the winner can bear offspring to secure the new royal bloodline. Amelia, being innocent, didn't understand why Roswell called it convenient for the bloodline. This actually surprised Roswell. He knew Puck was overprotective, but not to that extent. He basically insinuated Puck was a bad father for being so controlling. But there was no time to argue. They had arrived at the castle. Inside, while Amelia waited nervously in the VIP room, Roswell pulled Puck aside. The clown got straight to the point. In a few hours, Amelia would take the stage, and the nobles who despise her origin would tear her apart. Roswell knew someone would speak up to attack her first, and he knew these people wouldn't be silenced by brute force alone. He knew their mindset from his time living as Julia Mathers, so he proposed a deal to the Great Spirit to stage a little play to benefit Amelia. The plan wasn't to change how they viewed half-elves, but how they viewed Amelia. Roswaal wanted Puck to display his overwhelming power as the Beast of the End who defeated Melicuera, but simultaneously proved that Amelia was a benevolent master who would never use that power to force her will on others. Puck was hesitant, but knew the Margrave was right about the public's perception. He asked how they would stage this demonstration. Was Roswaal planning to endanger the castle just so Amelia could stop it? Roswaal simply smiled and said, "Fortunately, he should create an opportunity for us." Puck froze. Subaru had promised to wait at the inn. Had Roswaal manipulated the boy too? Puck ended the conversation by calling out just how controlling Roswaal really is. In the end, the cat agreed to Roswaal's scheme to secure his daughter's future, fully knowing she would never approve of this method. Now do you understand why I dislike Puck? Remember, I've started a series covering cut content on the channel.
When Subaru, Rem, Amelia, and Roswaal traveled to the royal capital to officially announce the half-elf's candidacy to the public, those days were truly rough for Beatrice. This is recounted in the story titled Librarian Beatrice's Log, which tells us how Ram and Betty were the only ones left in the mansion for several days. On their first day together, Ram brought her famous steamed potatoes for breakfast. Betty simply thanked her for the meal and enjoyed it. Then for lunch, Ram brought the exact same dish again. Betty just accepted the plate and went about her business. When dinner time arrived, Ram brought the same plate of steamed potatoes once more, and Betty merely remarked that they didn't taste bad and that everything was fine. But when Ram brought the same dish for breakfast the next day, Betty could no longer hide her disgust at the repetitive menu. She complained, demanding that Ram cook something different, but Ram simply replied that she couldn't do that because her only specialty was steamed potatoes. Betty got annoyed and told her she should learn from her younger sister, who is talented at everything. Ram just said she is proud of her sister, but that she still wouldn't change her attitude. Immediately after, she proceeded to eat from Betty's plate. This infuriated the little girl, who stomped her foot on the ground, claiming Ram was showing bad manners. Ram simply commented that Subaru is that disrespectful to her, so she thought they could treat each other that way too. Then, the girls reflected on the recent events at the mansion and realized that this was the first time they were alone in the place together. Usually, it is Ram who accompanies Roswaal on his trips, but this time, Rem was the chosen one. Ram implied that perhaps this was an opportunity for them to get along better, but Betty replied that she only needs to get along with Puck. As Ram left, Betty was left thinking about how much she awaited the return of the black-haired boy and the younger sister. If they come back soon, she'll finally be able to eat something besides steamed potatoes again. She acknowledged that it was the first time she actually missed them. Unfortunately, when the other members of the mansion returned, Subaru and Rem did not come back. Only Roswaal, Puck, and Amelia returned. Instantly, Roswaal asked to speak with her. Beatrice told him she wouldn't help if it was a matter related to Amelia's candidacy. Roswaal neither confirmed nor denied anything, but told her that he would soon head to the sanctuary to meet with the teacher. This topic left Betty perplexed, as she hadn't returned to that place in 400 years. Roswaal told her that he felt his first ancestor's greatest wish was about to be fulfilled, adding that this gave him hope for his future. The girl simply replied that she had stopped allowing herself the luxury of believing in those kinds of things a long time ago. The Margrave only added that she should consider this occasion, and since he genuinely desired her happiness, he felt it was right to come and warn her before leaving. Immediately after, he disappeared from the scene. When the door closed, Betty remained silent and, as if asking a person who simply wasn't in the room, said the following.
お母様、ベティはあとどれだけ?
You can find more facts about content cut from the anime on my channel. And since we haven't hit the 1 hour mark yet, let me add 3 of the news shorts to reach 60 minutes so the video title actually makes sense. One interesting thing to mention is that I was originally going to edit the news segments myself, but I got so focused on making long-form videos that I handed the editing for these over to a completely different editor. So if the editing in this section feels a bit different, that's why. Remember Hector? That powerhouse villain who showed up in Season 2 just to absolutely humiliate Roswaal 400 years ago and then vanish into thin air? That was all we knew about him, at least until last year, when it was revealed that he was actually defeated shortly after the events of the Sanctuary. But what if I told you that his defeat was actually revealed 6 years ago, not last year like most people think? The thing is, nobody noticed simply because ZzZero fans, well, they don't read their own side stories. The reality is that Taipei handed us the answer on a silver platter right in the middle of the pandemic, and we totally slept on it. Back in 2020, the novel Once Upon a Time in Lugunica was released, a prequel set 15 years before the anime. In it, during a fight to the death, a young Marcus asks his opponent, Roswaal, if he's afraid of dying. And the Margrave drops a line that shocked a huge chunk of the fandom back then. Why would I be afraid? I already defeated the man I feared most in this world, all on my own, a long time ago. At the time, everyone thought he was just being arrogant, but nope. Last year, in 2025, Volume 41 finally confirmed that Roswaal and Clind actually managed to defeat Hector. In fact, that's where Clind obtained the melancholy factor. That line Roswaal dropped in 2020 wasn't a flex. It was a massive spoiler that only a few people caught. Roswaal had already told us that the Warlock of Melancholy had fallen, but we were too busy surviving the pandemic to notice. I'll confess, I only read that novel a couple of years ago myself, but be honest in the comments. Did you actually read that novel, or did you just find out from me right now? Are you team reading or team summary? Let me know, and remember that I've started a series on cut content over on the channel.
Thought Lugunica was the only one in trouble? 6 years ago, Tappy revealed that the entire ReZzero world is collapsing all at once, and we were too blind to see it. In a 2020 side story set during Subaru's adventures in the Watchtower, Russell Fellow confirmed the fall of 2 great Maybeasts. Well, one was still unconfirmed, but we know they both went down. It looked like the beginning of world peace, but Russell wasn't nearly that optimistic. While meeting with Reinhard and Felt, he warned the Sword Saint that his spies had reported an imminent civil war in the Empire of Wallachia. And here's the kicker. He said that if the Emperor lost that war, the peace treaty from EX4 would mean nothing. That's just how the ruthless rulers of that region operate. On top of that, he dropped even more bad news. Russell reported strong rumors of a new witch appearing in Gusteko, and it seems the power balance in Kararagi is starting to crack due to factors we still don't fully understand. Russell confirmed that this massive wave of changes has happened once before, and let's just say the world didn't exactly handle it well last time. In fact, at the end of that era, half the world was devoured by the witch. This resulted in the cut-off map we know today, which is exactly what you see on screen. The last time the ReZzero world saw turbulence like this was 400 years ago. If you're a loyal fan, you know exactly what that implies. After all, we're talking about the era when the witches were active and the great sage Flugel was alive. It's not just Lugunica going through a crisis, the entire world is literally on fire. And that's not even counting the prophecy revealed later about the 4 great calamities destined to destroy the world of ReZzero. Do you think Subaru can actually stop them? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget, I've started a new series on cut content over on my channel.
Did you know Subaru achieved the impossible? He actually won a moral debate against Priscilla Bariel and, get this, made her admit she was wrong without losing his head. It happened in Arc 7. After capturing Arakia, the Shudrakians wanted to execute her for gravely wounding their chieftain. Everyone expected Priscilla to step in for her former servant, but she just coldly replied that if the Divine General's fate ended there, that wasn't her problem. Subaru, sick of that attitude, told her that life doesn't come back once it's gone. Offended, Priscilla unleashed her murderous aura, asking how he dared to lecture her on the value of life. Did he actually think her judgment could be wrong? The air in the room instantly froze. Al and the girls thought Subaru was dead meat right there. But our protagonist just looked her in the eye and delivered a suicidal line. He told the Sun Princess she wasn't omnipotent and that even she could make mistakes. He stood his ground, claiming he knew he wasn't wrong. Honestly, he was practically begging to be beheaded with that answer. But instead of burning him alive, Priscilla just lowered her fan, accepted the criticism in silence, and ordered the Shudrak to spare Arakia. In the end, Subaru was right. Priscilla actually cared about Arakia and wanted to save her. She just couldn't express it at that moment. There's a reason why she later allowed herself to be captured by the villain. It was all for her former servant's sake. That day, Subaru didn't just save Arakia, someone key to the final battle. He proved he's the only one capable of taming the Sun Princess's ego, a task his Temu copy, Aldebaran, could never achieve. Do you think if Subaru had met Priscilla before Amelia, they would have gotten along? Let me know in the comments. And remember, I've started a new series on cut content over on my channel. And with that, we've reached the 1 hour mark. I know some of you might have been expecting a brand new video, but I had to get this up first. Once again, I'm sorry for the lack of long-form videos, but I've had a lot going on in my life. In the coming days, I'll be uploading a video on how to read all of ReZzero, which I predict will have a lot of reach. Likewise, I'll soon be sharing news regarding the goal for the EX1 video. but give me just a few more days. Thanks for making it this far into the video, and if you enjoyed this recap, you can watch or re-watch the first hour of trivia, which I'll leave on the screen for you now.